Okay. Okay. First of all, at the very outset, I'm thankful to the organizer of Kolkata Bidhannagar Society for Academic Advancement for giving me the opportunity for delivering a lecture. Today, my topic is um, working capital management, and I am Priyanka Banik from Chandra College. And today, I'm going to introduce this particular topic. It's a very important one. So, let me share my screen. Is my screen is visible to you all? Okay, okay, thank you. So this is our topic, working capital. So let us start about it. So what is this working capital? Working capital is basically the pool of fund available to a particular company to meet its ongoing operational needs, including the financing of day-to-day expenses, payment of short-term obligation, and managing fluctuation in cash flows. That is basically the working capital. Now, effective management of this working capital is essential for the financial health and sustainability of a company. Insufficient amount of working capital can lead to cash flow problems, missed opportunities, and even the inability to meet short-term obligation. Conversely, excessive amount of working capital may indicate inefficiency or underutilization of resources, which can reduce profitability. So, in a nutshell, we can say that working capital is a fundamental financial metric that represent a company's ability to meet short-term obligation. That is very important to meet short-term obligation and sustain its day-to-day operation. Effective management of working capital is crucial for the financial stability and success of a business. Okay, so that is basically the working capital, and through this screen you can get the basic concept. Okay, we all know that what is working capital in a single line. It is basically the excess of current asset over current liability. Okay, that's the basically the formula of working capital. And if somebody asks you describe working capital, the capital which is required for day to day operation of a particular farm or a business, that is basically termed as working capital. Okay, so that's the basic one. Now I'm just moving towards the next slide over, that is the different types of working capital. Now from this particular diagram, it is clear that first of all we segregate working capital on the basis of concept and on the basis of time. Now on the basis of concept, working capital is two types: gross working capital and net working capital. Okay. And again, we can bifurcate this net working capital in positive as well as a negative working capital. Okay. Now, on the basis of time, working capital categorized into two parts: permanent or fixed working capital and temporary or variable working capital. Now, this permanent again bifurcated into two parts: regular and reserve. And this temporary or variable working capital again classified into two parts: seasonal and special. Now, just moving towards our on the basis of concept, first category is gross working capital. Gross working capital is nothing but of the total current asset. Okay, What is gross working capital? Total current asset, and you can arrive this total current asset by using this formula also. That is from the liability side, entire liability side, shareholders fund, long term debt, current liability, and from this you need to deduct your fixed asset and you will arrive the total current asset, which is none other than the gross working capital. Okay, gross working capital. Okay, next I'm moving towards the second one, and this thing is very important. um, this current asset, whenever we are talking about current asset are those assets which can be converted into cash within an accounting year. That's important. Okay, gross working means total current asset. From the asset side of a balance sheet, we can easily find out the current asset, and from the other side, that means from the liability side of the balance sheet, you can again arrive your gross working capital. The entire liability side, that means the shareholders fund, where you find various type of share capital and reserve. Thereafter, you need to add long-term debt. Again, with this, you need to add the current liability, and from this, you need to deduct the fixed asset, and you will arrive your gross working capital. Now, this one is the net working capital. Net working capital is basically what we discuss in our introductory portion. Basically, these things we know as working capital, excess of current asset over current liability. Okay, so this net working capital from the other side, that means from liability side, you can also arrive shareholders fund, long term debt. Then with from this you need to deduct fixed asset. There is a just have a look on the differences in gross working capital. The entire liability side we consider, then we deduct fixed asset. But whenever we are talking about net working capital, we only consider the shareholders fund and long term debt. Okay, from there we deduct fixed asset. Actually, if you have a look on the balance sheet, current asset and current liability, we just keep those portion to get our net working capital. Actually, the difference between these two represent net working capital. Okay, it basically, this net working capital measures firm's liquidity, and it represents short term debt repayment capability of a particular firm. Now, this net working capital, again we bifurcate it into two parts, positive and negative. Okay, when the result is positive, that means current asset is more than your current liability, then this working capital is termed as positive working capital and vice versa. Okay, so it is desirable that the working capital should be positive, definitely, so that you can maintain the liquidity. Thus, it is called the safety margin of short-term liabilities. Okay, actually, this positive working capital, if you have the positive working capital, then your firm is capable enough to meet all its liability, current liability, all its due liabilities type of obligations. Okay, so this is also called the safety margin of short-term liabilities. Now, we just moving towards negative working capital. When this result is positive, that negative, that means your current liability is more than the current asset, then it is termed as negative working capital. Okay, negative working capital, which is just, it acts as an alarm for a particular firm, as it indicates the firm is not in a position to pay off its current dues, current liabilities. Okay, and it is sometimes they are compelled to use its fixed capital to meet their liability obligations. Okay, to meet their liability. In this situation, the very existence of the firm is in a question. Okay, so that is the negative. Positive and negative. Positive means when your result is in a positive format, মানে কি যখন আমাদের কারেন্ট অ্যাসেটটা একটু আমাদের কারেন্ট লাইবিলিটির থেকে বেশি হয়ে যায়, then we termed is positive working capital. Positive working capital is a good indicator. Okay, why it is a good indicator? Because it ensured that the firm is capable enough to meet all its liabilities. Okay, current liabilities. Okay, you have excess fund, excess current asset. Okay, through which you can easily meet your current liability. And what about the negative working capital? Just opposite of positive, and that is basically the alarming condition. Okay, so that's the basic two things. Now I'm just going back this slide. So we have done our basic concept. Okay, classification of working capital on the basis of basic concept. First concept আমরা যেটা discuss করলাম gross working capital, and next one is our net working capital. Okay, again we bifurcate this net working capital positive and negative. Okay, so in our university, as there are two prescribed language, English and Bengali, so sometime I use some Bengali words, so that it will be convenient to communicate our students. Okay, so basic concept working capital যে বেসিক কনসেপ্টের বেসিসে আমরা ডিসকাস করলাম, একটা হলো গ্রস আর নেট। ঠিক আছে, তো গ্রস বলতে টোটাল কারেন্ট অ্যাসেটকে রিপ্রেজেন্ট করছে, আর নেট মানে কি, যেটা আমরা জানি অ্যাকচুয়ালি ওয়ার্কিং ক্যাপিটাল মানে এক্সেস অফ কারেন্ট অ্যাসেট, মানে কারেন্ট অ্যাসেট মাইনাস কারেন্ট লাইবিলিটি, এক্সেস অফ কারেন্ট অ্যাসেট ওভার কারেন্ট লাইবিলিটি। নাও দিস নেট ওয়ার্কিং ক্যাপিটালে আমরা দুটো পোর্শন আমরা জানি, একটা হলো পজিটিভ। পজিটিভ মানে কি, যখন আমার কারেন্ট অ্যাসেটটা বেশি হচ্ছে কারেন্ট লাইবিলিটির থেকে, দ্যাটস আ গুড সিচুয়েশন। ওকে, দ্যাটস আ গুড ইন্ডিকেটর। কেন ওয়াই গুড ইন্ডিকেটর? কারণ দেখো তোমার কাছে অনেক বেশি পরিমাণে কারেন্ট অ্যাসেট রয়েছে। ওকে, কারেন্ট অ্যাসেট মানে আমরা কি কি জিনিস জানি? কারেন্ট অ্যাসেট মানে আমাদের স্টক আছে, ইনভেন্টরি রয়েছে, ডেটেড রয়েছে, ক্যাশ আছে, যেগুলো দিয়ে আমি আমার কি করতে পারি না, আমার মানে ক্যাশ এন্ড ক্যাশ ইকুইভ্যালেন্ট, এই যে ডেটের, এটাকে আমি ক্যাশে কনভার্ট করতে পারি। ইনভেন্টরি যত আমি সেল করব, ইনভেন্টরি কনভার্টেড হবে ইন ক্যাশ, and through that we can easily meet up our current liabilities. Okay, তো তার জন্য পজিটিভ ওয়ার্কিং ক্যাপিটাল ইজ আ গুড ইন্ডিকেটর। বাট whenever we are talking about নেগেটিভ ওয়ার্কিং ক্যাপিটাল, এটা কিন্তু মোটেও ভালো নয়। এটা মানে কোম্পানিকে এটা জাস্ট একটা অ্যালার্ম দিচ্ছে যে বি অ্যালার্ট, ইওর পজিশন ইজ নট ওয়েল। ওকে, লিকুইডিটি পজিশন ইজ নট ওয়েল। ওকে, কারণ কি, কোম্পানির এখন অনেক বেশি কারেন্ট লাইবিলিটি হয়ে গেছে রাদার দ্যান ইটস কারেন্ট অ্যাসেট। তো তাদের কারেন্ট লাইবিলিটি মিট করার জন্য সাফিসিয়েন্ট অ্যামাউন্ট অফ ফান্ড কিন্তু কোম্পানির কাছে নেই, এটা বুঝতে হবে। That's why this is a alarming situation, negative working capital. Okay, now we move on the classification of working capital on the basis of time. On the basis of time, permanent, again permanent, the other two part, and then temporary, again temporary, there are two parts. Okay, so basically the branches of this is the permanent working capital. This is the minimum level of current asset which is required to maintain in a particular company. Okay, so that is basically known as permanent or hardcore or fixed working capital. Okay, permanent, hardcore or fixed working capital, this is the minimum level of required current asset which a company must maintain. Okay, depending upon the changes in production and sales and the need for working capital over and above, the permanent working capital will fluctuate. Okay, permanent is fixed, you can't change it. Okay, permanent means permanent by the name, দেখো নামটা দেখেই বোঝা যাচ্ছে that's a permanent. Okay, and these type of, as per the Tandon committee mention it as a core current asset. Okay, so that thing is important, you must remember that this permanent working capital, this is very much important. Okay, not only for your this examination, semester examination, but for your competitive examination, this line is important for MCQ type of question. Okay, this permanent working capital is also known as core current asset. Why core current asset? Because you can't change it, you need to maintain, just like our fixed cost. Okay, fixed cost, a company can't operate without fixed cost. That's why we can't eliminate our business risks as it purely depend on the fixed cost. Okay, a company can run without its fixed financial charges, but a company cannot run without its fixed asset. That's why we know that in leverage chapter, learn it, right? You can't ignore your business risks like this. Your permanent hardcore or fixed working capital is that fixed level of current asset that you need to maintain in your business. Okay, এটাকে তুমি কিন্তু কখনো চেঞ্জ করতে পারো না। Okay, to continue your business, you must maintain this level of current asset. That's why Tandon Committee mentioned it as a core current asset. Core current asset. Sorry. Okay, next slide. This is again a bifurcation of this permanent working capital. We can subdivide it into two parts: regular working capital and reverse working capital. On somebody says it reverse margin. Okay. This is the regular. What about this regular working capital? It is the minimum amount of working capital or liquid capital which is required to keep up the circulation of capital from cash to inventories, receivable, and again to cash. That means it's nothing but to maintain our operating cycle, we require that amount of capital, that amount of working capital. That's why this is known as regular working capital. Okay, regular working capital. Day to day, it's required for your day to day operation. Okay, for round about for circulation of that the operating cycle. Working capital again, we require that regular working capital. Reverse margin or reserve working capital. What is that? It should be kept to meet the contingencies. Okay, if there is any contingency, we just it's just like our savings. Okay, we try to keep something from our earning so that we can meet our contingency. Like this, a company also keep something, keep some amount, keep some fund, just like the reserve to meet their contingency. That is known as reserve margin. Okay, so these two are the part of permanent working capital. Permanent working capital কে আমরা দুটো ভাগে আবার ভাঙছি। First one is regular. Regular হচ্ছে আমাদের working capital এর সাইকেলের ফ্লোটা মেনটেন করার জন্য যেটুকু ক্যাপিটাল দরকার, working capital দরকার লাগবে। নেক্সট হচ্ছে রিজার্ভ মার্জিন বা হচ্ছে রিজার্ভ ওয়ার্কিং ক্যাপিটাল, সেটাও পার্মানেন্টের একটা পোর্শন। পার্মানেন্টের একটা পোর্শন থেকে যেটা রেগুলার ডে টু ডে অ্যাক্টিভিটির জন্য সাইকেলটাকে মেনটেন করার জন্য আমি রাখছিলাম, দ্যাট ইজ টার্মড অ্যাজ আওয়ার রেগুলার। অ্যান্ড কিছু এক্সেস যেটা আমি ফিউচারে যদি কোনো কন্টিনজেন্সি হয়, সেটাকে মানে ফিউচারে আমার যদি কোনো আনসার্টেনটি দেখা দেয়, সেখানে টাকা দরকার পড়বে, তো টু মিট দ্যাট টাইপ অফ কন্টিনজেন্সি উই মাস্ট মেনটেন দিস reserve margin. Okay, so moving towards our next slide, that is the variable working capital. This line, okay, it's important that I change the font color, that is in red. So what is the variable or temporary working capital? This is that amount of working capital which a company maintain over and above the permanent working capital. Okay, that is basically known as variable working capital. Okay, permanent is always fixed, and when a company requires something over and above this permanent level, fixed level এর বেশি যদি কিছু দরকার পড়ে, that is known as temporary or variable working capital. Okay, it is required. Why it is required? It is required to meet the seasonal fluctuation and for any other special purposes. Okay, so that is the variable or temporary working capital. Next, moving towards this slide, this temporary working capital can again be divided into two parts. First one is seasonal and next one is special. Okay, so what about the seasonal category? The working capital that is required to meet the seasonal demand. Just like here I put up one example, demand for air conditioner that will be more in summer season. Okay, we were the witness in previous month. Okay, So now, when we found that the demand for air conditioned cooler, ceiling fan will be um, um, and more. Okay, to meet the seasonal demand, the company must maintain some working capital so that it can maintain its production. So that is known as seasonal working capital. Okay, so the working capital, seasonal working capital means what? The working capital which is required to meet the seasonal demand. Okay, seasonal demand meet করার জন্য আমার যে working capital টা দরকার, that is known as seasonal working capital. Now moving towards our next subhead of this temporary working capital, special or variable working capital. It is that part of variable working capital which is required for financing special operations. Special operation. This is to meet the seasonal demand, and this is to meet the special operations such as extensive marketing campaign, carrying of a special job, etc. etc. Okay. So just remember one thing, by this name you can easily write. Okay, seasonal means to meet the seasonal demand, and whenever we are talking about special, that means um, to finance some special operation. Okay, only remember these two things. It's important. And other thing you can write by your own, in your own language. You can write it. Only just understand the concept. Seasonal means to meet the seasonal demand, and whenever we are talking about special, special means to financing the special operation, we require this type of working capital. Okay. So by this, we are just the end of the classification of working capital. Just recap once again. This is the entire working capital. Working capital definition. If somebody asks you what is working capital, yes, you can tell them, yes, that is the working capital. The capital which is required for day-to-day operation of a business. It's nothing but the working capital. Okay, we termed this as working capital, or you may term as it's basically the pool of fund. What is working capital? It's basically the pool of fund available to a company to meet its ongoing operational needs, including the financing of day-to-day expenses, payment of short-term obligation, and managing fluctuation in cash flow. That is basically the concept of working capital. Now, on the basis of concept gross net, we already discussed. Gross means total current asset, net means current asset minus current liability. When this result is positive, that means current asset is more than current liability, positive working capital. Current liability is more than the current asset, negative working capital. Good indicator for a business, bad indicator. It's like a alarming situation. Okay. Now on the basis of time, permanent or fixed, that is required. We need to maintain it. Without it, a company can't operate. Okay, it's again two type: regular, reserve. This temporary, again two types: seasonal, special. Okay. Now moving towards our next category, it's basically a graph. Yeah, graph of permanent. I just put this one, but another one is also there where we can you can found permanent working capital is just like this type of line, and above it the variable working capital. Okay. And in another type of graph, you can see just like of this type of thing. This is the permanent straight line, and variable working capital is just like this. Okay, in any kind of FM book, you find there's two type of diagram. Okay, I'm just moving towards you. Okay, this is working capital cycle, very much important. Okay, so what is this working capital cycle? This is basically the repeated process of circulating the working capital from Cash to raw material. See, when you have cash, through this cash you purchase something. What you purchase? You purchase raw material. Okay. What do you purchase? You purchase raw material through this. This is the raw material inventory. Okay. Then raw material to finished goods. Then raw material moves on the production process. Then this production process you will get your finished goods, right? Then finished goods to then what happens? When a company produce finished goods, they approach to the market, to the consumer to buy their product. Okay, and when the customer are interested, they obviously buy their product. Now when they buy, that means this is just like a sale for a particular company, and now this sale is two type. We all know that cash and credit. One is cash sales and another one is credit sales, that we know. And from this credit sale, this account receivable generate, then we collect cash from our debtors. And again you can see that when we collect cash, that means we start at this point and again we go back at this point. This entire cycle is known as working capital cycle. It's important for your examination purpose. Okay, just remember, from cash you are using this cash while purchasing what? Raw material. Then you just passing this raw material in your production process, and from this you will get your finished goods, and this finished goods you are approaching to the market. If the buyer likes it, they buy it, and when they buy it, you are able to generate sales. And we know that this sales is two type, cash and credit. From the cash sales you can directly, after this you will get back this. One cycle ends here. And if you have credit sales, that means you have this account receivable, then you just collect cash. You have to collect cash and then you can go back here. Okay, the entire thing is known as working capital cycle. This one is important. So in a nutshell we can say that what is working capital cycle? This is basically the repeated process of circulating the working capital from cash to raw material, cash to raw material to finished goods to trade debtor, and again from trade debtor to cash is called working capital cycle. Okay, so that is basically working capital cycle. I repeat once again. Basically, first of all, you must remember this is a repeated process, a circulating process. Okay, repeated process of circulating what? Working capital from cash to RM, RM to FG, RM then raw material, then FG to finished goods, then finished goods to debtor, and then debtor to cash. Okay, as simple as that. Okay, now next thing is important for you, that is the financing of current asset. Financing of current asset, another important aspect in this chapter. Okay, you may expect your question from this portion also. Okay, there are two sources of financing. We all know that. One is long-term sources, another one is short-term sources, right? The current asset can be financed from these two sources in the following three approaches. First one is hedging or matching approaches. Next is conservative approach, and last but not the least is aggressive approach. Okay, this hedging and matching approach, this diagram is important. Okay, this diagram is important. Here you need to put the monetary symbol. Okay, in our India, this is rupees. Okay, this is the time foundation. That means vertically we measure in monetary terms and horizontally we measure the times. Okay, so see, whenever we are at hedging or matching approach, what about this approach? You will get this diagram in any FM book or in internet. But listen, what is this approach? As per this approach, the minimum amount of current asset which is required for whole year, for the entire year, should be procured from long-term sources. Okay, should be procured from long-term sources. Remember, this is permanent current asset, or okay. This permanent current asset is required for maintaining the production process throughout the year. So, as per this matching or hedging approach, it should be financed through long-term sources. Okay, they should be financed through long-term sources. Okay, and the part which is required for meeting the seasonal demand should be procured from short-term sources. See, this is a part which is required to meet the seasonal demand, that must be financed from short-term sources. Okay, actually these two are the total asset. This two summation of these two are the total asset. Okay, this permanent current asset or permanent working capital we required, right? This permanent current asset that is required to maintain the flow of production for the entire year. So as per this hedging or matching approach, this approach tells us whenever you are going to finance your permanent current asset, always use long-term sources. Okay, and whenever you are going to finance your fluctuating current asset, that is the seasonal current asset, always use short term debt. That is the matching or hedging approach. Okay, in nutshell. So I repeat once again, remember it clearly. Whenever we are talking about permanent current asset, it should be financed by long term sources, and whenever we are talking about fluctuating or seasonal current asset, it should be financed by short term. Okay, so that is known as hedging or matching approach. So matching approach আমাদের কি বললো, আমরা যখন পার্মানেন্ট কারেন্ট অ্যাসেট ফাইন্যান্স করব, আমরা অলওয়েজ ইউজ করব লং টার্ম ডেট। ওকে, ডেট অর ইকুইটি ক্যাপিটাল, মানে আমরা মানে লং টার্ম সোর্সেস আমরা ইউজ করবো আর কি। আর যখন আমরা ফ্ল্যাকচুয়েটিং কারেন্ট অ্যাসেট সরি ফাইন্যান্স করতে চাইছি, তখন কিন্তু আমরা শর্ট টার্মটাকে ইউজ করব, শর্ট টার্ম সোর্সেসটাকে ইউজ করব। ওকে, দ্যাট ইজ অল অ্যাবাউট দ্য ম্যাচিং অর হেজিং। ওকে, in any kind of book there's a lots of theoretical notes, but remember this basic concept. If you can write it in your own language, it's good for you. Okay, so that is all about the hedging or matching approach. Next thing, that is the conservative approach. Okay, so what about this approach? According to this approach, the entire estimate current asset should be procured from long-term sources. As here by the name you can see conservative, they are very conservative ones, so they don't prefer to use this one short term. This is as whatever be your working capital requirement, please use long term sources. Good. Okay, as per the conservative approach, the entire estimated current asset should be procured from long term sources, and short term sources should be used only to meet the emergency requirement. That is important. That is important. Okay, only to meet. See, this is our permanent current asset. This amount is our temporary current asset. So the entire thing permanent plus temporary is our total current asset requirement. And as per this conservative, as they are the conservative mindset, so they suggest us to use long-term sources to finance our entire working capital requirement. And so what about these short-term sources? Short-term sources, this approach suggests us short-term sources should be used only for meeting the emergency requirement, only for meeting the emergency requirement. Okay, emergency requirement. For emergency requirement you can use short term debt. Okay, that is all about the conservative approach. And our last approach, aggressive. aggressive, just opposite of this. They believe on long term, but they believe on short term. You can see. Okay, that's why they are aggressive. Aggressive approach. According to this approach, the entire estimated requirement of current asset should be financed from short term, as I told you, just opposite of conservative. Conservative believe on long term. Yes, you. What about your entire requirement of current asset? You should use your long term sources to finance it. But whenever we are at aggressive approach is just opposite of conservative approach. Here, this approach tells us whatever be your the estimated requirement of current asset that should be financed from short term sources. Okay, in fact, this aggressive approach suggests us a part of fixed asset may be financed from short term from short term sources. Okay, this approach, you can see that this approach is more risky and less costly and more profitable. Yeah, definitely. Whenever you are going to be a more amount of risks, obviously you will expect more profit. Okay, so that's all about this three type of approaches. First one, matching. Conservative, just opposite thing is aggressive. Aggressive focus on short term. That's why this is risky but profitable and less costlier. Whenever you are talking about conservative, more focus is given on long term. And here, when you are at matching or hedging, here, your this approach suggests that permanent or fixed current asset should be through financed by long-term sources. And what about your fluctuating requirement or seasonal requirement that you can finance through your short-term sources? Okay, so these three the financing of current assets. Now, this thing is important. Profitability, liquidity profitability triangle. Somebody says it's liquidity profitability triangle, or somebody says it is a trade-off. Okay, so listen it very carefully. It's another important aspect in our working capital concept. Okay, so basic, what is the basic objective of our working capital management? To increase profitability without hampering liquidity. Okay. They basically try to increase profitability but without hurting your liquidity position. Okay. Whenever I'm going to enter this deeply, you find that whenever your these two things, profitability and liquidity, is just opposite. When your liquidity increase, it hurts profitability, and when your profitability increase, it hurts your liquidity. Okay, so the basic objective of WC management, that means the working capital management, to increase profitability but without affecting your liquidity position. Okay, liquidity position means what? Means you are capable enough to meet your current liability. Okay, and we know that current liability are made out of current asset, and if the amount of current asset increases, the liquidity position of the firm improve. We all know that. As a result, its working capital also get increased. So more the working capital, better the liquidity position. It's quite natural of a firm, but a part of current asset. But if you increase your working capital more and more and more, then what happen? As a result, some amount of current asset remain idle. As a result, what happened? Your profitability hurts. Okay, so your profitability hurt, and profitability, and if you want to increase your profitability, then obviously you need to compromise with your liquidity. So what's the solution? Our profitability and liquidity are always our profitability and liquidity always contradictory. What's the answer? So let's have a look upon it. Okay, the answer is very simple. It cannot be said that the liquidity always must be decreased if profitability increase, because their relationship may be of three types. This is the first phase, this is the second phase, and that the third phase. Okay, so let's discuss the first one. First phase. In first phase, follow the line. Okay, it is just upward trending line. Okay, at the first phase of production, if current liability are met quickly, profitability increases because the suppliers supply raw material quickly, production increases. Okay, as the supplier supply raw material on time, definitely you can shift it in your production process and your production increases. Okay, and goods are sold. When production increases, FG also increases. And what happened? Goods are sold quickly. In this phase, profit increase as your sales are increasing. Okay, in this phase, profit increase. Though the customer are allowed longer credit period because sale price are fixed at a higher rate. So in this phase, a positive correlation exists in between profitability and liquidity. Okay, so in this phase, you can't say that both are contradictory. Okay, no, they are not. They are going hand on hand. Profitability and liquidity going hand in hand. Okay, liquidity increase as well as profitability also increase. Whenever we are talking about the second phase, what happened? You can see both are stagnant here. Okay, that's why this is a flat line. In second phase, what happened? Production attains such a level that that profitability does not increase even if liquidity increases. Because under the situation, the cost of procuring additional capital required for additional volume of production just equal to the profit earned from the increased production. Okay, so here what happened? Profit remains static in this phase even if liquidity increases. That is to say, a neutral correlation exists between liquidity and profitability. That's why the line is flat here. Okay, and if we are talking about this phase, that is the third phase, under this phase, the volume of production so increases that the supplier cannot supply raw material more quickly because here you produce too much. Okay, you need not produce much right now, so supplier cannot supply raw material more quickly even if their claim is met very quickly by increasing liquidity. So production process cannot be performed more rapidly. As a result of this, as the velocity of sale cannot be increased more, if the firm increases liquidity, a part of working capital remain idle, but interest has to be paid on it, right? For this, in this phase, profitability decrease even if liquidity increase. That is, a negative correlation exists here. Okay, so that's all about this profitability liquidity triangle. Okay, now we just moving towards our next slide, that is the factors which determine the working capital requirement. Okay, that is the it's a very common one. First of all, see first how much working capital required for your business definitely depends on the nature of the business. Okay, for example, public utility concern. Under public utility concern, water, electricity, gas, etc. falls. Okay. This supplying concern generally renders services in cash and working capital of this concern never blocked on account of unsold stock or trade debtors. So they do not require a very large amount of working capital as their liquid cash is rotate very rapidly. On the other hand, the working capital remain blocked in various stages of production and buying and selling in manufacturing and trading concerns. So they need large amount of working capital. That's why you can easily understand the nature is important. Okay, and this nature is one important factor while determining the working capital for your business. Then size of your business is also important to determine the working capital requirement. A large scale of business require large amount of working capital. Okay, because the amount of production and buying and selling of them is very large. On the other hand, small scale business they require comparatively less amount of working capital. Next one is the, so we discussed this two thing, nature, size, then production process. The stages through which the production of a product is completed are called production process that we all know. The industrial undertakings, which have a number of production processes, require much time to complete finished goods and need large amount of working capital. As for instance, oil refinery or chemical industry, they require large amount of working capital for having long production process. On the other hand, the production process of making bread or biscuit can be completed within very short span. So not much amount of working capital is needed for their production. Next one is seasonal variation, right? Seasonal variation. For example, sugarcane or raw wool can be easily obtained only at the time of season, as the sugar industry and woolen industry have to store raw material at the season of production. For maintaining the continuity in production throughout the year, they need a large amount of working capital. Okay, or seasonal variation. Next is the business cycle. When there is a boom in market, okay, your company as in its boom situation, the amount of sales increases, definitely price of the goods increases, and the way of expansion of the business is easily accessible. So a huge amount of working capital you require on that time. On the other hand, the amount of investment in current asset is less at the time of depression. Okay, next. That's all about the business cycle. So in which cycle your business right now, that's important. Credit policy. Credit policy. It also requirement also depend upon the credit policy. The less the period of credit allowed to the debtor and more the period of credit allowed by the creditor and less will be the requirement of working capital. Okay, simple. Next is see growth and expansion. Next point, growth and expansion. If the expansion and growth take place in a business, the amount of working capital is required to be increased in order to keep the production process, order to keep the flow production process. Okay, though it is very difficult to determine the relationship between growth in the volume of business and growth of its working capital, but it can be said undoubtedly that if a firm does not make proper arrangement for the required working capital for expansion and new product, then investment in fixed asset does not become effective due to lack of working capital. Okay, dividend policy also another determining factor while working capital, while fixing your working capital, then technological changes you need to consider it. You can't ignore the degree of competition. Okay, depreciation, level of tax, and changes in price level. Okay, these are the some important factors. So that's the theoretical portion in working capital chapter. Whatever I discuss, the important in your examination purpose as well as in your concept developing purpose. Okay, Okay. Now the next one. Here I am going to showing you the a sample question. Through this you can get an idea about your semester end examination. Okay. So this is our FM paper code. Full marks 80 we all know. Full marks is 100. 100 is again bifurcated into two parts. Just ignore about my handwriting as I am using this pen. 80 and 20 and 20 you know, 10 for internal and 10 for your attendance. See, in group A, there are total 6 questions. You can see in group A, there are total 6 questions, each carrying 5 marks. Remember one thing, it's important for you all. Don't skip a particular chapter because here you can see first question, time value of money. This is a theoretical question. This is one exam problem from that specific chapter. So if you skip the entire chapter, you may lose some questions. Okay. Next, this question is for your second chapter. Again, here you can see that means you can select between 1 and 2. In 1, you will get 2 alternative. Among these 2 alternative, you need to pick any one. Okay. So in group A, you have total 6 questions. Among 6 questions, 2 are compulsory. 2 are compulsory. That's the general trend. Okay. Sometimes there is alternative, but don't follow the question pattern of 20 and 21 because due to corona, the question pattern deviate on that time for the betterment of student. Okay, but this structure you can follow the question of 2020 2019 and so on. Okay, that type of questions you will get the proper format. So in group A, here we have total 2 group. In group A, you have total 6 questions and all are compulsory question. Remember one thing, forget to skip a particular chapter. Yes, I don't like dividend policy or I don't like working capital, so I just keep it. But don't do it. Okay. So in group A, there are total 6 questions, each carrying 5 marks. So whenever we are talking about group B, here also same. Here also you can select between 7 and 8. In 7, there are 2 questions. Here generally the normal 10 says that theory and problem. Theory and problem in group B. Okay. So you can't skip a particular chapter. So in group B, there are total in group A 6 questions, each carrying 5 marks. In group B, there are total 5 questions, each carrying 10 marks. Okay, 5 questions, each carrying 10 marks. That means 50, and from group A, 30. Total 80. Okay, so this is the question. This is one standard format of question. Okay, I hope that is clear for you all. There you have 2 group A and group B. Group A, you need to answer 6 questions. Remember, all are compulsory question. Okay, there is some intra alternative, but don't think about the inter. Okay, that means you can select between 1 and 2. You need to answer within this 2 alternatives. In group B also, in group B total 5 questions, you have to answer 5 questions, each carrying 10 marks. Okay, that's a sample question. Now here there is a question. I'm going to solve this question right now. That is 2019's question. Okay, just have a look on this particular question. From the following information presented by a manufacturing company, you are required to prepare the statement showing working capital requirement for the year 1920. Expected monthly sale is given. See, monthly sale data is given for monthly sale. Amount is selling price per unit is 15. Anticipated ratio raw material 40%. Wages 30%. Budgeted overhead is worked out 50,000 per week. See, per week, and here the information is given per month. Okay. So between month and week, obviously this you are required to convert. Follow the entire information. If you find maximum information is given as per the week, then try to convert everything is in week. Okay. Follow a particular sequence. যদি দেখো সব উইকে ম্যাক্সিমাম ইনফরমেশন দেওয়া রয়েছে তো উইকে কনভার্ট করে নাও, যদি মান্থে দেওয়া আছে মান্থে কনভার্ট করে নাও, ঠিক আছে? তো যেটা থাকবে একটা ইউনিফর্ম জিনিস মেনটেন করতে হবে। ওকে, আচ্ছা লাস্টে যে আমি কোয়েশ্চেনটা বললাম একটু বাংলায় বলে দিই, যারা আছো ইংলিশ প্রবলেম হচ্ছে বাংলায় বলে দিই, কোয়েশ্চেন প্যাটার্নটা ইম্পর্টেন্ট, এটা বুঝে নাও। কোয়েশ্চেন আমাদের থাকবে কিন্তু দুটো গ্রুপে। গ্রুপ এ 5টা কোয়েশ্চেন, সরি 6টা কোয়েশ্চেন করতে হবে 5 মার্কসের। এবার কি হবে, কোয়েশ্চেন ধরো 1 to 6 থাকবে গ্রুপ এ তে, তুমি কিন্তু 1 আর 2 এর মধ্যে যে কোনো একটা কোয়েশ্চেন করতে পারবে না। 1 এর মধ্যেই ধরো দুটো অল্টারনেটিভ থাকলো, মানে একটা 1 এ দুটো কোয়েশ্চেন, দুটোর মধ্যে তোমাকে যে কোনো একটা করতে হবে। তুমি কিন্তু 2 আর মানে 1 and 2 এর মধ্যে কোনো অর পাবে না, 2 আর 3 এর মধ্যে কোনো অর পাবে না। অল কোয়েশ্চেন্স আর কম্পালসারি। ওকে, all questions are compulsory, so better কোনো চ্যাপ্টার স্কিপ না করা, কোনো চ্যাপ্টার স্কিপ না করা। ওকে, and FMA কিন্তু theory is always important. Okay, it has a weightage on theory. আর এখানে এই পেপারটায় গ্রুপ বির কোয়েশ্চেন আমি একটু আরেকবার আমার স্যাম্পল কোয়েশ্চেনটা দেখাচ্ছি। দেখো গ্রুপ বির কোয়েশ্চেনে কিন্তু কি থাকে, গ্রুপ বির কোয়েশ্চেনে যেমন একটা প্রবলেম থাকে 10 মার্কসের প্রবলেম থাকে, তার সাথে সাথে কিন্তু একটা করে থিওরি অপশনে দেওয়া থাকে। ঠিক আছে, তাহলে গ্রুপ বি তেও কিন্তু সেম হবে। তুমি কিন্তু দুটো কোয়েশ্চেনের মাঝখানে অর পাবে না, একটা কোয়েশ্চেনের মধ্যেই দুটো পার্ট থাক, মানে অল্টারনেট থাকবে। ইউ নিড টু পিক এনি ওয়ান। ওকে, বাট ডোন্ট এক্সপেক্ট 8 আর 9 এর মধ্যে একটা করব, কারণ আমার ভাল লাগছে না, ঠিক আছে আমি ওয়ার্কিং ক্যাপিটালটা ছেড়ে দিচ্ছি। তো ওয়ার্কিং ক্যাপিটালটা ছেড়ে দিলে তুমি কিন্তু ইউ মে লুজ পার্টিকুলার কোয়েশ্চেন। ওকে, তো কোনো চ্যাপ্টার কিন্তু ছাড়া যাবে না, অল আর কম্পালসারি। আচ্ছা ঠিক আছে, আমাদের যে প্রবলেমটা আমরা করছিলাম 2019 এর প্রবলেম, এটা দেখে নিই একটু। Overhead is worked out as 50,000 per week and overhead expenses include a depreciation important per week এ দেওয়া রয়েছে। দেখো plant stock including raw material 1,20,000। আচ্ছা, প্ল্যান স্টকে র মেটেরিয়াল ইনক্লুডেড রয়েছে রুপিস 1,20,000 আর 40,000 রয়েছে এফজি তে। দেখি নেক্সট কি বলেছে। মেটেরিয়াল উইল স্টে ইন প্রসেস, ইম্পর্টেন্ট দেখো মেটেরিয়াল স্টে করছে প্রসেসে কতদিন, 2 উইকস। যখনই কোয়েশ্চেন পড়বে আন্ডারলাইন ইট, ইট উইল সেভ ইউর টাইম। ক্রেডিট পিরিয়ড allowed to debtor 5 week, allowed to creditor 1 month, you need to convert this 1 month equals to 4 week. Okay, lag in payment in wages and overhead 2 weeks. Okay, 20% important, 20% of sales to be assumed against cash, তার মানে যা সেলস হবে 80% credit 20% cash. Okay, cash in hand expected to 50,000. Okay, so let us have a look on the solution. আচ্ছা, সলিউশনটা আগেই বলি, আমার সলিউশনটা কিন্তু একটু অন্যরকম। ঠিক আছে, এটা নর্মাল ম্যাক্সিমাম স্টুডেন্ট যেভাবে করে বা ম্যাক্সিমাম বইতে যেভাবে সলিউশনটা করা থাকে, সলিউশনটা কিন্তু সেরকম নয়। ওকে, একটু অন্যরকম সলিউশনটা, বাট it will save your time, definitely it will save your time, cause দেখো আমি তোমাকে দেখাচ্ছি একটু ওয়ার্কিং ক্যাপিটাল রিকোয়ারমেন্ট আমাদের এইটুকু জায়গায় হয়ে গেছে পুরো অঙ্কটা। কিন্তু এটাই যদি তুমি তোমার মতো প্রসেসে, মানে নর্মাল ম্যাক্সিমাম স্টুডেন্ট যে প্রসেসে করে সেই প্রসেসে করলে তোমার লেন্দি হবে, অনেক সময় লাগবে। ওকে, সো বেটার আমি একটা বুঝিয়ে দিচ্ছি, ট্রাই করো বোঝার, কজ এখন প্রত্যেকেরই সিলেবাস কমপ্লিট and examination is just knocking at our door, so only 1 month left. So just have a look here. Our starting point কি production and sales per week আমরা করব, একটু ডিফারেন্টলি অঙ্কটা করছি, বোঝার চেষ্টা করো। বাট আমি কখনোই বলবো না যে তুমি তোমার ট্র্যাডিশনাল মেথড ভেঙে এইভাবে করো। ইফ ইউ ক্যান, you can accept it, otherwise follow your own method. Okay, ওকে, আমি একটা শিওর করতে পারি যে এটা তোমার টাইমটা সেভ করবে। দেখো আমাদের মান্থলি সেল কত বলেছিল 1 লাখ, অ্যাজ সমস্ত ইনফরমেশনই এখানে উইকের বেসিসে দেওয়া রয়েছে, তো 1 মান্থ ইকুয়ালস টু 4 উইক। আমি কি করছি, উইকলি সেলস বের করে নিচ্ছি। দেখো প্রোডাকশন এন্ড সেলস পার উইক বের করে নিলাম। কত বলেছিল, 1 লাখ ইউনিট, এক মান্থে 4 উইক হয়, তাই 1 লাখ ডিভাইডেড বাই 4, 25,000 ইউনিটস। ওকে, নেক্সট আমাদের যেই আমাদের ফার্স্ট স্টেপ হচ্ছে, আমরা তিনটে স্টেপে অঙ্কটা করি। ফার্স্ট স্টেপ হচ্ছে প্রোডাকশন এন্ড সেলস, এটা যদি যেরকম বলে দেবে মানে উইক, মান্থ, ইয়ারলি যা বলবে তুমি সেই বেসিসে বের করবে, করলাম আমরা। নেক্সট স্টেপে আমরা কি করব, কস্ট ব্লক পার উইক ফর ইচ কম্পোনেন্ট। একটা জিনিস ভালো করে বুঝে নাও, কস্ট ব্লক পার উইক, অ্যাজ হিয়ার আমাদের ম্যাক্সিমাম ইনফরমেশন উইকে রয়েছে, তাই আমি এখানে পার উইক বললাম। যদি ম্যাক্সিমাম ইনফরমেশন মান্থে থাকে পার মান্থ, মানে এটা ভ্যারি করবে। কস্ট ব্লক পার উইক, এই পার উইক পার কি হবে, মান্থ হবে না উইক হবে না কি হবে, এটা ভ্যারি করবে অ্যাজ পার ইয়োর কোয়েশ্চেন পেপার। ঠিক আছে, বোঝা গেল? তাহলে কস্ট ব্লক পার উইক ফর ইচ কম্পোনেন্ট, তিনখানা জিনিস করবো, র মেটেরিয়াল, ওয়ার্কিং প্রোগ্রেস আর ফিনিশ গুডস। ঠিক আছে, সবার ফার্স্টে র মেটেরিয়ালস এ আসছি। দেখো র মেটেরিয়াল কত বলেছিল, 40%। কার 40%? 15 এর 40%। ওকে, 15 এর 40%, সেলিং প্রাইস দিয়ে দিয়েছে 50, তার 15 এর 40%, ক্যালকুলেটর নিয়ে করে দেখো 15 এর 40% করলে কত আসে, 6 টাকা আসে, রাইট? তো আমাদের দেখো প্রোডাকশন এন্ড সেলস পার উইক কত হয়েছে, 25,000। তাহলে এই প্রোডাকশন করার জন্য তো আমার র মেটেরিয়াল লেগেছে, কত লাগবে, 25,000 ইউনিটস প্রডিউস করার জন্য র মেটেরিয়াল, একটা ইউনিট প্রডিউস করতে র মেটেরিয়ালের কস্ট কত, দেখো 15 বলেছিল, the anticipated ratio of raw material cost and wages of selling price, সেলিং প্রাইসের ওপরেই করতে হবে, বলে দিয়েছে কোয়েশ্চেনে। 15 এর 40% করলে হয় 6, আর আমি পার উইকে কত প্রডিউস করেছি, 25,000, 25,000 ইন্টু 6 করে তিনটে কলামে বসিয়ে দেবে। নেক্সট, ওকে, র মেটেরিয়ালটা বোঝা গেছে আশা করি। নেক্সট আমি আসছি, কি আছে আমাদের, ওয়েজেস 30%, কার উপরে 30% হবে, 15 এর 30%। ওকে, 15 এর 30% করবো, দেখো 4.5 হবে। 15 এর 30% করলে 4.5 হবে, 4.5 ইন্টু 25,000। ঠিক আছে, আচ্ছা এখানে একটা কথা বলার আছে, র মেটেরিয়াল যা হবে তিনটে কলামে বসিয়ে দেবে। ওকে, জাস্ট পুট ইট ইন 3 columns. Okay, after calculating raw material, see our production and sales is 25,000 units, and from where I will get this 6? Follow the question paper, selling price 15 and all the costs are estimated over the selling price. Raw material is 40%, 40% of this 15, which comes at 6. Okay, so 25,000 into 6, put it on all the columns. But whenever we at wages, 25,000 into 30% of 15, that means 4.5. Then what figure comes? 25,000 into 4.5. Okay, 4.5, it comes 1,12,500. Put it in FG, put it in FG, and here beside it write down 50%, 50% for WIP. Okay, 50% for WIP. 50% you need to put here. Why? Because that is work in progress. এন্টায়ার কাজটা আমাদের তো একদিনে করা সম্ভব হয় না, আমরা কি করি, অল্প 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 করে কাজ করি, তাই এটা অনেকটা একটা ট্রায়াঙ্গেলের শেপ নেয়। ওকে, and area of the triangle যে ফর্মুলা ছিল, on the basis of that, that comes 50% of 50% for this WIP. So remember, raw material তিনটেতেই বসিয়ে দেবে full amount. Put raw material the entire amount in RM, WIP and FG. But in case of others in FG, put the entire thing, and for WIP put the half, 50%. Okay, Novaret also just things remain same, 50% for WIP. Okay, okay, now you need to add all these figures. You need to add all these figures. Just keep this one. Okay, keep this one, just add up all these figures. This is the result. Now our statement. Okay, that is the statement showing WC requirement. See, first of all, here statement showing WC requirement. See, statement showing WC requirement here, particular and 3 columns. First column is block period, next amount block per week, last one is amount. First of all, current asset, raw material. See, follow the question paper. Plant stock will include raw material 1,20,000 C, raw material. Now, what about the block period 1,20,000? And here it comes 15 lakh. So, sorry, 1,50,000. 1,20,000 divided by 1,50,000, and you will get your block period. How to calculate block period? 1,20,000 divided by, sometimes block period is given, and when block period is not given but this amount is given, you can easily find out block period. Block period কি করে পাবে তখন? দেখো যা বলে দেওয়া ছিল 1,20,000 বলে দেওয়া ছিল, divided by this 1,50,000, and you will get your block period. Okay, amount block per week, this one, put it, multiply this two, and you will arrive this WIP. WIP এর ক্ষেত্রে দেখো ব্লক পিরিয়ড বলা ছিল WIP তে। See, material will stay in process 2 weeks, so ফটাফট ব্লকে 2 weeks বসাবো। amount block per week দেখো WIP 2,21,250 বসাচ্ছি, মাল্টিপ্লাই করছি, লাস্ট কলাম চলে আসছে। ওকে, ফিনিশ গুডস এখানেও আবার বলে দিয়েছিল আমাদের ফিনিশ গুডস এর ব্যাপারে। সি হিয়ার ফিনিশ গুডস, সি 40,000 units of finished goods. Okay, 40,000 units of finished goods. Okay, 40,000, and per week our production and sales is 25,000. So 40,000 divided by 25,000, and you will get your block period 1.5, and your FG's total is 2,92,500. Put it here, multiply this two, and you will get it. Now debtor, that is important regarding debtor. Okay, debtor on sale price. If the problem remains ident about the sale or cost, then always go for sales. Okay, see, 25,000 is our entire production and sales per week. But see, এখানে একটা দেখো গল্প আছে, বলে দিয়েছে yes 20% sale may be against cash, তাহলে 20% যদি ক্যাশে হয় 80% সেলস হবে ক্রেডিটে। তাহলে দেখো এই যে এখানে আমি ডেটার করেছি 20,000, এই 20,000 আমি কিভাবে পেয়েছি? 25,000 ইন্টু 80%, 25,000 ইন্টু 80% করলে আমাদের চলে আসে 20,000 ইন্টু সেলিং প্রাইস কত বলা ছিল? সেলিং প্রাইস ছিল 15, but there is a depreciation. Okay, 15 ছিল selling price. From this selling price we need to consider depreciation. You may consider it, you may not, both are correct. Okay, both are correct. Okay, so let's see what happened. Okay, so that is the next portion. Here you can see, so I consider here the depreciation is how much? Depreciation is given 20,000, so this 20 divided by 20 divided by 25,000, 20 divided by 25,000, 0.8, 0.8 you need to deduct. Okay, so 20,000 into 15 minus 0.8, and you will get this. And here now this one, from where you will get this? Okay, so this Yeah, we'll get this. And whenever you add up all this is the total current asset. Now, regarding current liability, again, see your creditor block period is given 1 month, that means 4. Okay, and one more thing. Yeah, this one, creditor. Creditor depends upon this raw material. So this raw material into block period, and you will get this outstanding wages and salaries. This thing, outstanding wages and salaries. Wages and salaries, fixed goods. Just add up these two, and you will get this figure. Put it here, and multiplying it with the blocking period, you will arrive the result. Okay, add up this two, will get your total current liability. Now working capital requirement, we all know that current asset minus current liability, and you will get it. Add cash, and you will get the total working capital requirement. Okay, so that's a problem. Try to solve 10 years question. Okay, so that's all. That's all for my presentation. Thank you to you all. Okay, I'm just leaving the meeting.